Good morning. If I know everybody's excited to get started, and we need to do just that, get started. Guys, we are up on the second floor getting ready to go live with the program. If everybody wants to start heading up those stairs and get your seat for that first set of programming, join us on a wonderful day here in Denver, site of the 2008 Democratic National Convention and the 2008 Big Ten event. The Big Ten is a big deal, and it's been brought to you by Progress Now, the Daily Co's, and the Alliance for Sustainable Colorado. The Alliance is where this is being held. Several days ago, this was a empty parking lot, and now it's a two-stage, two-floor tent with an amazing group of people coming to talk about making change in the world. So we're glad you're here, whether online or in person. The Alliance is a unifying force here in Colorado for the sustainability movement, and they're doing that through collaboration, and much of that is what you're going to see up here on the stage. Collaboration of some ideas from some amazing people, and hopefully we'll all go away knowing that much more. So to get us started, I'd like to introduce the founder of the Alliance for Sustainable Colorado, Mr. John Powers, and John will get us started for the day.
So what I share with Dusty.
Good morning. Some people haven't seen morning yet. Thank you all for coming. I'm John Powers, the founder of the Alliance for Sustainable Colorado. The Alliance, along with Progress Now, one of the tenants in the Alliance Center, there are 27 nonprofit tenants, is co-hosting this Big Tent event along with the Daily Coast. So thank you all for coming. This morning we have a very interesting lineup, collection of people, and it's my privilege to introduce Catherine Archuleta, the Senior Policy Advisor for Mayor John Hickenlooper. The title Senior Policy Advisor doesn't begin to describe all the things that Catherine Archuleta does. If you want to get to understand the city of Denver and how it functions and how to get things to work properly, Catherine Archuleta is the person to talk to. Catherine, are you available? So I get to tell you just a little bit more about the Alliance as Catherine is getting her microphone put on. We have a building alongside that has been renovated under U.S. Green Building Council LEED standards, one of two buildings in the world, at least at the time we got our LEED standards, that has two of them. It's a green building. And of the 27 nonprofit tenants, about a dozen of them are environmental and 15 from other sectors, including Latina. And here she is now, one of my favorite people, Catherine Archuleta.
Today is Oye, Evolution of the Latino Presence in the West. We have a great panel today to talk to you about a number of issues that are confronting the Latino community. We have Maria Teresa Peterson, who is the president of Voto Latino. And if you haven't heard about Voto Latino, you should, because it is going to be one of the most important social movements that's coming across America. The votes that are needed to change America will be coming out of the Latino community. And Voto Latino is working on a year-round basis to bring those voices to the table and to place them inside the voting booth. In addition, Dusty Gurulay Dusty is the director of the Latina Initiative Project, based here in Denver. It is a partner with Voto Latino. It is a grassroots movement that is engaging Latinas from throughout the community to be a part of the voices of change. The Latina Initiative is one of the most important voter education projects nationally recognized here in Colorado. Our next guest is Polly Baca, who is the CEO of the Latin American Research and Service Agency. And as you know, La Raza is one of the most important nonprofit organizations that we have here in Colorado, serving the Latino community, making sure that the issues that are most important to the Latino community are heard, and also that we are collaborating with all of the La Raza affiliates across the country. Finally, we have Polly Sandoval. I'm sorry. Finally, we have Paul Sandoval. Sorry. Paul Sandoval is a former Colorado State Senator, co-owner of Tamales by La Casita. And that introduction doesn't really, or that title doesn't really give justice to who Paul is. Paul has been a long-time leader in the Latino community, making sure that as policy and direction for our state is being developed, Paul is at the forefront of those issues. We have a great panel here today, all of them ready to talk about the issues that are most important in the West, in the new West, the new energy that we have in the West, and the new opportunities that we have for Latinos. So I think we'll begin with Maria Teresa to talk a little bit about Voto Latino.
It's on. Thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you again for having us host here, because I think what we're talking about today is very critical, and I think it wins elections. And Voto Latino, as Catherine had mentioned, we do voter engagement on the national level, and we identify local community partners, such as Latina Initiative, Progress Now, and UFCW that we're doing here in Colorado. And it's called Colorado Represents, and hopefully you'll be hearing a lot about us, and very influential together and collective. And what we're going to talk about a little bit today is how Colorado really represents the swing states. There are of the 13 swing states, there's 6 states that represent a Latino electorate of 10% or more, meaning that they literally could win this election. With 18 million Latino eligible voters, the last election was decided with less than 2 million. So I'm excited to be here in Colorado, and I'm excited to be here on the ground with folks that actually are doing the work day to day, and this didn't happen yesterday. It's work that's been going on since before I was born, and I'm thrilled to be learning so much about it here today. So with that, Dusty, why don't you share a little bit about the work that you're doing here locally and how important it is critically to get the Latina vote specifically out?
Is my mic on? Oh, there it goes. So I'm the Executive Director of the Latina Initiative. We have been working, the organization was founded actually by Catherine Archuleta, was one of our founders. In 2002. Since 2004, we've been working consistently to engage Latinas and their families to be engaged civically. And so when we look at civic engagement, we look at more than just voting. A lot of organizations do get out the vote work, and that's fine and well because there are plenty of Latinos and their families, but we really believe that we have to maintain a consistent presence to help build up that capacity and that confidence for people to actually participate and be well informed. And being civically engaged means, again, more than just voting. We really work with people year round on policy issues. We do an advocacy day. We do a Serious Women, Serious Issues conference to really engage Latinas and their families into the political process. And we've been very successful. I think we've been really have raised the capacity of the community. There's a lot of work to do, and the work that we do as a C3 really takes a lot of time and resources, and so we're very committed to continuing that, and partnering with organizations such as yours and other organizations, but we still have a lot of work to do.
And Dusty, what have you found as far as the Latino vote here in Colorado? What does it look like for Barack? What does it look like for McCain? Do you know?
Well, as a nonpartisan organization, we aren't allowed legally to engage people on specific candidates, but we do focus on issue education, and so issues that are important to our community, which are the same for every community: the economy, healthcare, education, immigration, and we're actually working as a tenant of the Alliance Center and partnering with other organizations to integrate conservation and environmental issues into our platform. That said, I think as we continue to engage Latinas and their families, not only on issues but also the process, I think then they become better informed, and then they can determine which candidate better suits their needs on issues of equal opportunity, pay equity, and such as that. So it's, we can't really ask people, who are you supporting? It's really, these are the issues that are important.
And what's resonating the most then in Colorado?
The economy, and I mean, we were part of an event yesterday on conventional women, which was great because it really wanted to bring women's issues to the forefront, and which is a natural fit for us because we do focus on Latinas as the entry point, but we also work to engage the entire family. So, you know, the economy, pay equity, equal opportunity. I mean, there's a ballot initiative this year that we're working diligently against, which is Amendment 46, which would not only impact women, but also people of color and equal opportunities. So.
No, I think you touch upon a lot of things. What we're finding on a national level, the economy is the number one, and folks, I think, oftentimes think it's immigration, but it's really the economy that's driving us to the polls. Now, Paul, I know that you've been around, and I think that you can really be testament. How has the Latino vote in Colorado specifically evolved since you started first your grassroots organizing? Has it evolved?
Actually, the grassroots organizing started after the Taft-Hartley Act passed in 1950. My father and uncle were part of the labor movement, and they started the Meatpackers Association in Denver, and they started registering Hispanics and others in 1952, and from then on they became a very powerful organization. In the 1950s early, they had started very small, and it grew to the point that in 1960, during the JFK-Nixon race, they had registered, if I remember correctly, about, at this time, 1,600 people in Denver, Hispanics only. That was not a huge number, but given the population that we had, it was. They had continued to organize in the 70s, and I became very involved in the political structure, along with Catherine and Federico and others. To that point, when Federico Peña ran for the mayorship, Catherine and others were very instrumental in registering almost 5,000 people in 1 week. That became the essence of Federico becoming elected the mayor of his city. We had continued this on through Wellington Webb and others to the point that in 1998, when Kenny Salazar ran, myself and others, we had registered over 40,000 in the state. That continued on when he became the United States Senator, and we continue to do this on an ongoing basis.
So what triggered it? Because a lot of folks always say that Latinos aren't engaged in the political process. What triggered your numbers? Was it because Senator Salazar was Latino, or was it because he was talking about the issues? What do you think really triggered that engagement, that involvement?
The triggering started during the labor movement, but it continued on, particularly after Eloy Morris in 1958 lost an election to Jerry Rose, which should have been a Hispanic representative seat. They lost that. Well, we lost that, and we didn't forget that. We then continued on, and it really became very popular in the early 70s, with Bishop Evans giving us a $5,000 grant to go out and register Hispanics in the city of Denver, the outlying areas, and in Greeley. Representative Betty Benavides, her husband Waldo, and many others, we took that and we registered almost 3,500 people. And it just continued. When Federico Peña ran for the state representative and became minority leader, a lot of people encouraged him to run for mayor, including Bill Daniels at that time, the magnate of cable television. Nobody thought he could win. Very few of us were working on it, and it just grew into a phenomenon. When he was endorsed by the Rocky Mountain News, it just blew up. And then at that time, it was, we have to go out and register the Hispanics. And that's when it took about 2 weeks, and we did over 5,000 people.
That's impressive.
In 2 weeks.
That's impressive.
And from then on, it just grew.
So that was a lot of door knocking, I assume?
Absolutely.
There's a lot of radio engagement, I assume? I think, because I think the lessons that we need to learn is like, how do you get those big numbers? What do you do?
Door to door.
Door to door.
Door to door, neighborhood to neighborhood, engaging them in why you have to do it, the importance of getting registered, going to the ballot, voting, and then staying registered, because at one time they used to expunge you after you didn't vote. That's changed, but it's continually ongoing as to registering and voting, registering, voting. And in the state of Colorado, I think that if we do not register and vote, McCain will win. There's no question in my mind, given the history.
And What do you believe in that, Paul?
Well, I think Paul is right on target. What Paul was sharing in terms of what was happening here in Colorado in the 50s was also happening throughout the Southwest. You know, it was the meat packers, the steel workers, the mine, mill, and smelter workers. You know, unions that had large Hispanic populations. In the 50s, I think Mexican Americans, it was really Mexican Americans in those years in the Southwest, were really beginning to become more and more aware of the issues that were of importance to our communities. And this really, I think, started after World War II in the 40s and 50s, and that grew. So in 58, in addition to what Paul was sharing here in Colorado, there was a gentleman by the name of Hank Lopez who ran for Secretary of State in California. And he was the first Latino to run statewide, to try to get the nomination. And he ran a Viva Lopez campaign, which was interesting because in 1960, Carlos McCormick, who was from Arizona and had a patronage job at the United States Capitol as a policeman, had become friends with the young senator from Massachusetts. And they became buddies, truly buddies. You know, Carlos used to be invited out to Hyannisport and whatever. But when John Kennedy announced for the presidency, Carlos, just said, "Hey, I'd like to help you, and I think we should have a Viva Kennedy operation." So Carlos literally went throughout the Southwest here in Colorado. I was in college at the time, and I was the college chair of the Viva Kennedy campaign. But it included everybody that was anybody, at that time, all across the spectrum, all the Hispanics in Colorado, the leadership, from Bernie Valdez to Corky Gonzalez to, Lino Lopez and Eddie Terrones and everybody who was anybody in those years. But it was just an amazing campaign because that Viva Kennedy campaign throughout the United States, and mostly, I have to admit, it was primarily focused in the 5 southwestern states, plus a little bit in Illinois and Indiana in the Midwest. But it was really Texas, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, California.
The swing states today.
Yeah, 90%, over 90% of Latinos in 1960 voted for John F. Kennedy. And then that continued on. The Kennedys were special for our community because of the Catholicism and the inspiration that we felt as a result. In 1968, with Bobby Kennedy running for the presidency of the United States, I was working with him, or for him. I was on his national campaign staff, and was sent out to Los Angeles and was working out of the Ambassador Hotel. The day of the election, we had done an incredible job, much like what Paul was describing was going on here in Colorado, was going on, throughout. Just something was happening to our community. We were becoming more aware. And in 1968, of course, it was Cesar Chavez and Bert Corona who were really the focal point. They were the leaders of that Viva Kennedy effort.
I guess, Catherine, I think that's what we're seeing right here is that there's a continuation,
yes.
Right? So there's been a wave. So my question to you then, Catherine, is then why all of a sudden has people all of a sudden discovered Latinos this year, right? It's been a movement that's been going on since the 1950s. It's been going on in the swing states for a very long time. Why all of a sudden are politicians interested? I'll share a little story. People are always shocked when I say the majority of Latino voters speak English. 79% consume in English. And you're kidding. No, it's not. We're not speaking in Spanish, are we? So I think, what's this new discovery? Why the new interest? And what can folks do? What are the lessons learned, do you think, from these instances?
So one of the most important things is our sheer numbers. I think when anybody is taking a look at any election, they're looking at the pockets of voters. And I think the projects like Voto Latino and the Latina Initiative really are looking at the numbers as well. We know that our families follow one another to the voting polls. And if we can educate one member, we can educate a whole family. And that's really important. I also think that, Polly and Paul and I grew up in an era where we had that enthusiasm for the Kennedys and for the issues, where Cesar Chavez, and here in Denver with Corky Gonzalez, we really worked on that. But those are folks who are much older than the young people who are in our state today and who are really our new voters. And I think that Voto Latino and the Latina Initiative are really focused on those new voters or voters who have voted once and are ready to vote again. And if we can get the issues in front of them, if we can talk to them about how they should be deciding how their vote should be cast, I think that's the most important work that we can do. I also think that the access to these voters has changed completely. The three of us are used to doing mailers and door knocking. You know, that's a time of the past. It is no longer relevant to how we reach voters today. We reach voters through social networking, through text messages, and unfortunately through some of the robocalls that we're all receiving. But frankly, technology has changed how we're reaching out to voters today. And I think that the Voto Latino and the Latina Initiative are ahead of that in really thinking about how we reach our young voters, how we can actually get them to the polls and to cast the votes that are important for our community.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think if you look at the changing demographics of our community, we're continuing to grow, but we're very, very young, and we have a large percentage of people that aren't citizens. So how do we integrate both of those folks
Well,
that are
and here in Colorado, 33% of all Latino voters are under the age of 29. So I think that's...
So, I mean, I think projects like Voto Latino using, we have 2 leadership programs targeting young Latinos, one in local high schools, and then our LIPS project, which targets Latinas from 14 to 20, to really get them engaged, and again, beyond voting, because focus groups, conversations we've had with people that we work with, especially those that traditionally don't participate, and it's not because of apathy or that we don't care, it's just not having the adequate resources and information available. A lot of times politics is a insider's game, and you have to use the right words and blah, 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 but I think it's really something that we really work hard at, is breaking down those barriers and building those bridges. But I think to speak to the large immigrant community that we have, there are thousands of legal permanent residents, and we have worked and partnered with national organizations to engage those legal permanent residents to apply for citizenship. And we've seen, and I think working with those folks in that community, it's really about building trust and confidence with them, and then it spreads by word of mouth, not necessarily through text messaging or, a lot of the folks that we work with and who have since become citizens and taken the test and passed have been legal permanent residents for 10, 15, 20, 35. We had a woman who had been a legal permanent resident for 35 years, and because I think she felt connected to the work that we do, and because of Maria, of course, our awesome program director, really developing relationships with them. And when they became citizens, because if you've been to a citizenship ceremony, there are lots of people there to register you to vote. It's in your information packet. They made a concerted effort to register to vote with our organization because they knew that we're here, we're committed to helping them throughout their civic engagement process, whatever that means. And Maria still gets calls to this day from folks that have already gone through our programs. We actually have one woman who went through one of our workshops through our Yasora collaboration, went through the citizenship classes, volunteers with us, and now works as a substitute teacher for one of the classes. So she's really become integrated into our programming. And to me, that is really what this is all about. And granted, we need the big numbers, but to me, sometimes it's those stories that really, or with that one person telling 5 people or them telling 10 people, that's where we really get to the heart of it, I think.
And I think I'm sorry.
I think that there's an untapped resource out there, and a lot of people are forgetting it. There's a generational gap. And there are a huge number of Hispanics, 50 plus, and I see them every day, and they are not ready to vote. Literally, they will vote, but they're out there in transition as to who to vote for. And if the message is not given to them, or people are not contacting them as to the issues, they may lose those votes for a long time to come.
No, and you actually you mentioned something very interesting. Text messaging is incredibly effective for young people, but for Latino voters over 45, they actually read a piece of direct mail 35% more than the rest of the population. They're targeted only 2%. So I think that speaks to your point, is like there's a very missed opportunity, that there's tactics that have worked in the past. So my question to you folks in Colorado working together, how do you bridge that generational divide? How do you actually work together to make sure that we're tackling the influx of young new voters, the influx of recently arrived immigrants? Because I also know that for Colorado, most Latinos here are 6th, 7th generation. And then at the same time, how do you attract, the older voters that feel disenfranchised or that they haven't been reached out to? Kathy?
I was going to say the same thing as Polly just said, is that indeed it's all of the above, and the coalition of organizations working together, I think, is unprecedented here in Colorado. So we have the different organizations who are looking at voter education, voter registration, and voter turnout are all working together to reach all of the age groups, as Paul just suggested, so that we're the 50 plus that some of us are in already, to the 50 and below that you and Dusty represent. And I think by coalescing and really using all of the strategies for reaching voters is what we have to do. We can't give up on any of them. We just have to use all of them wisely. I think the most important thing too is that we're sharing resources. There's not a competition, so that whatever the voter education projects or the voter turnout projects, including registration, we're working together so that we're not all trying to reach the same person, that we've really shared the map and said, okay, this is where you're working, here's where we'll work, and by doing that, we're expanding our reach statewide.
They also have to, in all candor and honesty, we have to go out and convince that generational gap, myself included, that Barack Obama...
We'll talk outside. No, I'm sorry.
That Barack Obama, being black, is going to be good for this country. Or vice versa, is it John McCain, who's older, who they feel comfortable with? There is, like it or not, unspoken or spoken, some prejudicial feelings out there. And it's people better not think there isn't, because there is. And we have to go out, all of us, to say, look, we have experienced that prejudice from not being able to be put in the ground because we were veterans vis-a-vis the GI form, that's why it was formed, as to why we were denied our right to vote because we didn't own property, and now other times because we were excluded from the polls because we didn't vote. We've got to go out, all of us, in total, to say we have got to exercise the right to vote, which is our inalienable right under the Constitution and in our rights. And if we don't, we will lose that. But we have to look towards the generation ahead of us, because in the 2040, we will be the biggest population in this country, and we've got to learn how, like it or not, to start to vote, but particularly how to work within the political system and how to lead.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know there's been a lot of conversation about the candidates, and oftentimes, even though we're a C3, we work within the political electoral spectrum. People ask us that question, and time again, if you look at, and I go back to the issues, I mean, if you look at the fundamental issues of what's important to our community and what policies are going to help move our community forward, then to me it's a clear choice. And I can't verbally say that because I'm representing my organization right now, but it's a little frustrating to me, actually, some of the conversations that have been going on recently with, sure, you look at the candidate, but you have to look at the party and the platform of the party of who they represent. Someone, sure, they're an individual, and of course, you want to really believe in that individual person, but they're not working at it alone. They're part of a huge machine structure, the Republican, the Democratic Party. So if I don't see how people can separate the person from the party. That's just mind-boggling to me, and so it's a little frustrating, especially the work that we do. And so we really just try to, again, hone in on, okay, equal opportunity, health care, access, pay equity. Who stands for those issues, and how can it not be a clear decision? Sorry, it frustrates me.
Go ahead, Paula.
I think maybe what Paul might have been referring to is something that we've noticed, at La Raza, and that is that the boomers, and that's, the three of us here are part of we're no longer babies, but we are part of, that's why I just say the boomer generation. And it's that generation that was born, during or after World War II, and it's a huge generation. I mean, it's just all these babies that were born. We were the first to be politicized, and we were politicized of our, I think nationally, and there is, there's struggle in terms of what the boomer generation has been used to. It's been used to a different kind of phenomena when you're registering to vote and voting, and there is and it is that generational gap again, which is why we have to focus in on what the needs are of the boomer generation and what's making them feel uncomfortable. Right. What is it that is causing them to question? And we need to go out and do what Dusty said. Convince them or demonstrate to them that it's the issues that count.
Right.
It's our country that counts, and what's happening to the folks out there, that are in my own case, what is our concern about Social Security? Which president would assure the preservation of Social Security, or which one will try to privatize it? Which one is going to give us the kind of health care we need as elders? Can I call ourselves? We can call us elders, right? Of the issues that focus on our generation, and I think that maybe that will be the way to pull, to really activate this generation and maybe erase some of those doubts, because there are doubts and there are concerns, and we need to work on those.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. I think what happens oftentimes is that a lot of these things because it makes people uncomfortable to have this dialogue, that we like to sweep it under the carpet, but I think it's important to have those frank conversations and to say, look, fundamentally what we found is that the reason Latinos go to the polls, it's about issues. They may like the candidate, but it's really about issues. And I think it's having those communications, like, what is the candidate who's speaking to that? So if you were able to switch your hats, what would you be saying that you believe that the candidates are doing right, and what do you think they're doing wrong?
I can tell you, I think that these candidates, both of them, have got to address the issue. Catherine and I, Paulie, the number one issue, it probably is the economy, but the education of our children and our grandchildren. Those who talk about immigration should never forget, because they don't want to talk about it, they don't want them. Who fed this country in World War II if it was not the immigrants who fed our country, and after that in the Korean War? We don't need you, go back. Well, that's not right. We now have to concentrate to give our children the productivity and also the means to say, if you can't afford it to go to college, say you have a mother and father, they make $130,000. Their children are not eligible for grants for the most part. Give us grants at 2 or 3%. If you go into chemical engineering, mathematics, languages, the importance of languages is just phenomenal. We need them. You will be forgiven those loans. If you go into other high productive areas, dentistry, doctors, etc., you are forgiven these loans. We have got to educate our children. Not only minorities, all of them. But I'm particularly concerned about the minority children, because if we don't educate them, they're going to be forgotten.
No, and I think you actually touched on a very good point. You mentioned it earlier, by 2040 we're going to be the majority. And I think the important thing that we have to start changing the conversation and saying, this is not a Latino issue. This is an American issue. And unless we start enfranchising people in the democratic American process, I think we're all in the same ship together. We all can't jump off at the same time. So as America, we have to shape that conversation. So what kind of words of wisdom would you guys share with, folks working in the field, also on the national level? Why don't you start, Catherine?
I think for those working in the field, it is, I'll draw on the experience that especially the three of us have had. It is the passion and the vision that makes us go forward. And I think that we need to recreate that passion and vision, not only in our age group, but in all age groups, to move forward and to understand that we can make a difference, that we can make the change for our communities. But we have to do it one person at a time. And that's one-on-one, each one of us asking our mother, our sisters, our cousins, our aunts, our uncles to come to the polls with us, to make their voices heard.
I think that's fantastic. How about
I agree totally with what Catherine just said. And it is, so many, I think the thing that frustrates me the most is when I hear, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I vote. And that is something that I think we've been fighting, all of us have been fighting all our lives. When I ran for the legislature in 1974, there had never been a woman or a minority elected to the state legislature from Adams County. And I only won, when I was trying to get the nomination, it was a vacancy. And I only won that by one vote. I would not have ever had the life that I've led if it hadn't been for that one person who voted for me. And that one person could be any one of us, anybody that we know. That it does matter. Every single vote's matter. And, take a look at us. We all came from very humble beginnings. None of us, had a silver spoon in our mouth. We did not grow up with all the advantages. We grew up, some of us were, have been, some of us are from families who have been here in Colorado since 1600. But the rest, some of us are from families that just got here. But there's, but none of us had wealth. And so if we could have, if we've had impact politically, if we have been able to do that, then anyone can. And it's all a matter of each person saying, this is important. And it's important for me to get involved because at the end of my life, I want to look back on my life and say, hey, I did something. My life meant something because I got involved, I made a difference, I helped change this country so that it was more, it was more better, for my people.
And democracy is an evolution, right? So I think we're constantly enfranchising, we're constantly learning, and I think that's what you're addressing.
Mm-hmm. We have to demand of the people who win elections, regardless of their party, that they will hire those women and men of Hispanic origin, black origin, and others. You will put them on staff. If you do not, you will never get our vote again. I say this to you. I don't see enough women and Hispanics on MSNBC and on CNN. You are one of the few, and you are a good one. But they have got to start doing it. If they don't, I'm going to turn them off. I'll get my information someplace else. Need be if I have to go buy a computer, which I don't know how to use, or turn one on. But I will do that. And I will encourage others. And along with my grandchildren, we have got to demand from the political process that they will start now, not tomorrow, now, to recognize who we are because of our abilities and to hire us so we can go further into life with them.
No, absolutely. And Dusty, and I agree with you. I think it's interesting because this is doing MSNBC. I completely stumbled on it by accident. But what I found interesting was the ability, and this sounds very naive because I've been doing politics now for too long, but I realized the power really to start changing perception. And I think we undervalue that oftentimes, and that's important. So with that said, I know that we're very short on time. Dusty, what are your words of wisdom working in the field? And what are the things that what examples that we can that we can take here as Colorado as an example that folks can possibly duplicate in Arizona and New Mexico? Hefty, but.
Yeah. I mean, I think the couple things. So one, really acknowledging and honoring the inputs and the role that people can play, whether or not they're eligible to vote. So those people under 18, those people that are not citizens yet.
Absolutely.
And also the importance of collaboration and partnering with different organizations to really maximize and leverage your resources so that we can, because there are, and a lot of times there's like the territorial issues that come up, but there are plenty of Latinos to go around.
There's 46 million of us.
Yes. So,
and growing.
But I think, and I think, so that's very important, but I think probably the biggest point is going back to the first one that I made, is that really honoring and acknowledging what people can bring, what we all bring, because Latinos are very different, just like every other ethnic group or every population, but really acknowledging the gifts that we all bring, whether or not we're eligible to vote.
Fantastic. And I think the one last thing that we didn't touch upon is the lack of resources that's actually poured into the Latino community. And I think that's where people are missing the importance of Latinos themselves contributing to organizations and to candidates, but also really creating resources, because people call us the swing vote, but they're not putting enough money where their mouth is. So I think that's the importance. But I have to say that I'm incredibly humbled, and thank you so much for sharing your time. And thank you.